Welcome back, everyone, or if you're joining us for the first time, we're glad to have you with us. As instructors, you know that keeping your students engaged when they're with you is only half the challenge. In this next session, you'll hear from a collection of forward-thinking educators who are using Top Hat's content solutions to make learning more engaging and impactful outside of class. From authoring their own interactive readings to adopting and customizing nationally available titles, these educators will share how they're modernizing content for more relevant, inclusive, and affordable learning. Want to share your own learnings? Well, you can use the chat function, and if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature. We'll get to as many of these as we can. To lead this faculty panel, please welcome to the virtual stage from our product marketing team, Heather Taylor.
Thanks, Jake, and welcome everyone. I hope y'all are enjoying day 2 of summer camp. If you attended our last session, you know that student engagement is an important theme around here. And given how much time students spend learning on their own, engagement is just as important outside of the class as it is inside. We know today's students have different preferences and expectations compared to when many of us were in school. Right? They're comfortable reading and processing information on a screen. They like information served up in bite-sized chunks. They want to interact and engage with media. And these preferences are driving fundamental shifts around how we approach the creation of learning materials for today's students. Top Hat has earned a reputation for being a leader in student engagement. Yes, humble brag, I know, but it's about more than providing features like polls and quizzes to engage students and drive discussion. Over the years, we've developed a dynamic courseware offering that includes a robust catalog of interactive texts, as well as authoring tools instructors can use to create their own interactive learning resources. But if I could boil all of this down to a single word, it's customization. Whether you're adopting a Top Hat interactive text or creating your own materials, we want to make sure that you have the tools and flexibility to tailor your content to meet your course goals. And to ensure the materials reflect the needs, the interests, and the diversity of your students, because who knows your students better than you? Today, you're going to hear from 4 educators about how they're using Top Hat to do exactly this. So it is my pleasure to welcome 4 very accomplished and innovative educators to this conversation. We have Tanisha Albert from Auburn University, Keith Vance and Annetta Michalaki from the University of California, Riverside, and Blake Regan from Ohio University. Each speaker will share some of the unique ways they're using Top Hat to keep students engaged. Then, as Jake said, at the end, we'll regroup for a panel discussion. So make sure you're using that Q&A feature so we will make sure we will get to as many of your questions as we can. With that, I'd like to welcome our very first speaker. Hi, Tanisha. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Welcome. Hello, all the educators. Thanks for spending time with me to hear about the crazy things I'm doing.
Yes, we're glad to have you here. We want to hear about those crazy things. So Tanisha, could you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and the course you teach?
Absolutely. So I am an interior design professor at Auburn University. And before that, I was in practice. So our program here at Auburn is very much focused on creating practitioners, but focused on creating not just people who can do, but people who critically think. And so how I come into play here at Auburn is I teach not only our studio-based classes where our students actually take on practical theoretical projects, but I also teach theory-based courses to introduce students to the broader concepts of design. And in that, I've taken on the brave role of having all of my classes flipped. So that's how I came about Top Hat and how Top Hat has really helped me. I'm sure there's audible gasp from all the educators when I said a flipped classroom. And that really does mean students have an expectation. I have an expectation of my students to really engage with the course and the learning materials outside of class. Now, for me, I'm going to walk you through a little bit. I'm going to show you some of this class and how Top Hat has helped me to engage my students in this flipped model. The very first thing for me that I noticed when I started teaching, we won't say how many years ago, in this flip model, and it has been a while, is that my engagement was really low on the LMS that we use at the university. And so I migrated all of my content over to Top Hat. And then for this particular course, because it comes from so many different disciplines, there is no textbook. So students have to engage through to the course through Top Hat. One of the things that has promoted engagement for my students in this flip format is the way that Top Hat allows me to organize the content. And so one of the examples you see on the screen is that I very much put everything in modules and folders in both the LMS and in Top Hat. So my LMS talks to Top Hat. I can say, I'm opening this module on our LMS, and then they can see basically the same thing on Top Hat. So they know what the expectation for our particular section that they're going to be engaging with over several weeks, several days for this module. The next slide will show you a little bit of the content from those modules. So there is no textbook for this course. This particular course engages with lots of topics about global issues from design, and it's a theory-based course. So Top Hat really does allow me to embed multimedia and links into the course content that really, for this student population that's used to clicking on blogs and videos and learning in that way, instead of the traditional textbooks like we are usually used to engaging in, it seems to progress them through the content in a way that they can understand, and that's really more reachable to them and something that makes them feel less intimidated by the content. And this is a really intimidating course, I will say. And so with that, one of the some of the feedback that I got from my students that help them to engage with the content, especially while they're on their own in this flip format, is that Top Hat allows for this indexing. So I really leaned into indexing for my students. And for my neurodiverse students, this kind of content indexing really helps them to focus, to chunk down the material. But it also helps me in the classroom, where this is a completely discussion-based classroom. So we come into class, we do activities that they need the content that they learned outside of the class to engage in the classroom. It allows me to say, hey, if you look under the section, How Religion Shapes Design, you can find that information. And so it allows me to really continue moving the discussion forward in class, connecting with the material through the indexing format that Top Hat has. And then, as I mentioned before, there is no textbook that literally talks about religion and design or structural functionalism theory and design. And so I really have to lean in pulling different sources and physically showing these students, this is what I'm talking about, and this is what it means. And this on the screen is an example of that. And mind you, again, these students are having to read all of this content outside of class, away from me. So it's an iterative process where they read this on their own. My words are right here, the images they can see. And then we come in class and we talk about these different items and the different concepts. And so having the staggered layout approach also helps to break down the information for my neurodiverse students. But for my quote unquote visual learners, the information is literally side by side. And so they can see the application and design to this larger theory that we're talking about. And finally, hopefully for me, that means that my students come in class ready to, sorry, Heather, I swear I'm going to turn it over. But
You keep going, girl. You got this.
so for me, I hope that means my students come in class ready to engage with great notes, great questions, right? Because that's really, really what we want from all of our students, but especially in a flipped classroom, that they're ready to come in, they're curious about what they read, and they're ready to make some more knowledge. So thanks so much for having me, Heather.
Yeah, you're not off the hook yet. Thanks, Tanisha. I love that. And it just, you clearly care a lot about the student experience. And there were a couple of comments that came in through the chat about the student sentiment. So perhaps in summary, could you share the impact that using Top Hat has had on your student evaluations or any feedback you've received from your students?
Absolutely. So I will give you a great example. In 2019, I was teaching one of our technology classes, and all the information was through our LMS. And my students really were having, again, flip format, having a difficult time in really engaging with the content because of the scrolling situation. And so I migrated everything the next year to Top Hat, same content, you guys, same content. I didn't change a word. And my evaluations went up 1.5 points. So we're on a 5-point scale. And my evaluation scores went up 1.5. I didn't change a single thing about this course. I just migrated all the content to Top Hat. And so it really makes it less intimidating for them. They were saying they were able to parse it in a way where they could take breaks when they needed to, switch back and forth from the indexing, take their notes too, because Top Hat has a notes feature. And so it really did make the information accessible for them.
That's awesome, that Tanisha. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We know students don't hold back. So thank you for sharing that feedback and for all of the information here. And again, audience, if you have more questions for Tanisha, feel free to use the Q&A. We'll be bringing her back at the end for our panel discussion. With that, I am delighted to introduce our next speakers, Keith and Annetta, who are the authors of A Reader's Guide to Writing, which is one of Top Hat's nationally available texts. Hi, Keith and Annetta.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yes, and you probably win the award for best location for this meeting. You want to tell our audience where you're coming from, right? Where you're reporting in from right now?
Well, we prefer to think of it as dedication to education because we're here in Greece, so you know, we could be at the beach right now, but well, instead we're here with you.
That is dedication.
Yes.
We won't be jealous by that then. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Could you start off by talking a little bit about your motivation for authoring a textbook with Top Hat?
Certainly. So I'm the director of computer assisted instruction. And some years ago, I was basically landed with this position, and I had so many students, and it was up to me to make something happen. And so after a while, Annetta is my partner in this. We searched around and eventually found Top Hat, and it had so many of the features that we were wanting. Of course, at our university, we had Blackboard for a while. We had Canvas as well. So, we had tried a lot of different approaches. And so we were searching for something more, for an answer. So that's how we found Top Hat. And this has been a great journey so far, 6 years.
Yeah, and for me, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. And thank you, Heather, for, braving my last name and getting it absolutely correct. In my case, I was coming from the perspective of a classroom instructor, and I teach in composition courses, both online and in person, especially during the pandemic. And I often felt like I struggled with designing classroom activities in terms of, dealing with traditional courseware. I still felt that I had to often reinvent the wheel when it came to those classroom activities that were easily deployable, as well as other content. And of course, always the struggle with student work assessment in these courses. So we wanted to respond to those challenges we were having, and also give our fellow instructors some resources where they would solve these problems, but also they would have agency that would allow them to customize the content based on their teaching goals, on their student particular needs, and of course their teaching styles, all of which we think is very important. And then, as Keith mentioned, we came upon Top Hat and that wonderful platform that allowed us to make our vision come true and enable all these particular features we wanted to have. And as a result, we co-authored a reader's guide to writing that has all those features.
Yeah. So next slide. And I just want to add to what Annetta was talking about too. We didn't start out wanting necessarily to write this book, but I had 1,500 students in one quarter. So it became necessary to go further than just the resource packets and whatnot. And we were just really attracted to the functionality of Top Hat. And echoing what Tanisha was saying too, that ability to break up text, to insert images, to insert videos and charts, and enhance the text with all kinds of different activities. It was just a huge draw. And for me personally, it was just so much easier than using Blackboard or Canvas, even though I know there's an integration there. But as a user interface, it was just so much better. Next slide, please.
So in this, the vision that became a reader's guide to writing, which is unique in that it combines a reading anthology, a rhetoric, as well as an instructor's manual, we wanted to, again, facilitate instruction and be helpful to our fellow educators. So I know I echo a lot of my colleagues probably here today when I say there's so much to teach, there's so little time, and that's always one big challenge, especially in composition courses. So what we aspired to do, and Top Hat helped us with that, was to help our colleagues stay organized, to streamline their content, but also facilitate the delivery of that content, while at the same time reducing problems, questions, and the bombardment with emails they may get from students. So we wanted to have delivery of content in a streamlined, seamless, and efficient, but also customizable way. And streamlining and customization became possible through Top Hat.
And I just want to echo a little bit what Tanisha was also showing with her slide and the content tree on the left-hand side there. All of this is easily done. You can just move whatever assignments you want or create assignments and put them in the content tree. It's so unlike other platforms or even other books where those are essentially static and PDFs. This was really important to us because it allowed for that uncomplicated user interface, the centralization of course materials, and in some ways it eliminates the need for a traditional syllabus, an analytical syllabus, because there you just have your policies, and then in Top Hat you have all of the content tree. Next slide, please.
And basically, following up on the idea of customization and the ability to customize, even within this tree for one particular classroom, an instructor can have the agency to further customize, to edit the content, to also create different activities for different groups of students, even individual students, always depending on the individual student needs, because after all, that's what we're here for. That's what we aspire to do.
And next slide, you can see another example of that. So this is what we ended up doing then for our text, and anybody in the audience could develop their own materials as well, but we wanted to make sure that we had main points, questions for elaboration, work possible topics and whatnot outside of the particular text. So we wanted to integrate all of these different learning activities for inside and outside of the classroom, and just make it easy for us, but also for instructors. And as you can see on the next slide, for instance, another unique feature that Top Hat has is the ability to create all these different kinds of quizzes that are, of course, scored automatically. And you have the opportunity to put in feedback for incorrect and correct answers, of course. And as Annetta mentioned, the customization is really important with the different kinds of question types that you can put in as well. Next slide. This is just another example of what we ended up doing with our particular book. Next slide.
So here, all of this effort ultimately has to do with students and serving students as best as we can. And I know, again, I'm echoing a lot of my fellow educators that are in the audience right now or on this panel when I say we all aspire to be that instructor where students leave our classrooms and feel that they've had this very fulfilling and rich learning experience. And to that end, what we try to do, one of the things we try to do, aside from always customizing to particular student needs, we also try to include readings that are based on themes and topics that are relevant, they're modern, they're relevant to our students' generation, but at the same time, they are timeless because they're pertinent to human existence. So this learning experience is modernized, but it's not just due to the digital form of the content, but it's also because of the incorporation of intriguing and visually compelling text like images, videos, and of course, charts.
Next slide, please. So you can see an example of what Annetta was talking about then. It just makes the text come alive, right? And you have your content tree on the left-hand side, so it's easy for students to navigate as well. But of primary importance here was, of course, the interface, not just the interface for instructors, student interface. So it had to be simple, clean, uncluttered, where students would not get lost along the way, but we wanted to ensure that the learning experience had those traditional strategies that we think everybody looks for, right? The ability to annotate, highlight, bookmark things, and all of this in a visually intriguing and not text-heavy package. So ultimately, what we ended up trying to do, and we hope that we succeeded, was to create an immersive learning experience that would spur this type of engagement in the classroom, totally usable, but also outside the classroom. And we do have quite a few assessments that prove the efficacy of this. Next slide, please.
So ultimately, what is dynamic courseware? We wanted to share with you some of our experiences from the classroom and from our teaching. And the takeaway points that we would like you to have are that dynamic courseware is the courseware that gives instructors the flexibility and the resources to teach based on their student needs, but also on their own personal teaching styles, and never feel lost in a sea of educational resources. Instead, they can have available to them an abundance of well-curated resources, activities, topics, so that they feel comfortable teaching. They can also feel that they have agency and there's not too much cognitive load on them or their students.
And my last point is really that catering to preferences of the modern learner is really vital. Technology is a big part of their lives and our lives, but technology should not be about bells and whistles. It should not be overcomplicated and require a steep learning curve. It should not be used just to use technology and say that you did. Instead, it's at the service of the student and the learning experience. And we think that Top Hat as a platform is really awesome in facilitating this. And we were able to use the authoring tools to create our book. So thank you again for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you both. And thank you for just sharing your perspective as authors, as educators. It's powerful to hear how you've developed and customized dynamic content to truly serve your students. And just one request, next time you present, we just want some pictures from Greece so we can live vicariously through you. Thank you again. Now it's time to introduce our final speaker. I'd like to introduce my friend, our friend here at Top Hat, Blake, to this conversation. Blake, it's so nice to have you with us. If you could just start off by telling us a little bit about your background and the courses you teach.
Well, yeah, it's an honor and excited to be here. I'm a little background about me. I'm an associate professor of instruction at Ohio University, where luckily Ohio University has bought into Top Hat, where every student has access to Top Hat. And so the migration into Top Hat has kind of been fueled by that. But the courses I teach are introductory engineering courses for the calculus sequence. That curriculum is pretty set and solid by the state. And so I don't have much room in terms of negotiating that content, but how I deliver that content is really up to me. Like I have a 4-3 teaching load, and anywhere between 45 and 72 students. Usually the average is about 68 or so students, and the vast majority of those are freshmen. The calculus sequence in general, not just Ohio University, has a pretty low pass rate of about 60 to 64%, and it's very largely considered the gatekeeper for all STEM majors. And where my position is really unique is I'm actually housed within the College of Engineering, while also have bosses over in the arts and sciences for the math department. So it's a very unique challenge sometimes. But that my position came from the idea that the engineering were just losing students. And so I'm actually having to do a lot of put a lot of energy into trying to keep students within the college. And so it's an investment that the college makes for our students. And when it comes to my position, the way that I see my position is I have 3 main goals: deliver the content, assess the content, and motivate my students to achieve that. And one of my standing philosophies is that school is anywhere learning takes place. It doesn't have to happen in the 4 rooms of the class, 4 walls of the classroom, where there's a board at the front. And by leveraging technology, kind of as Keith was saying at the end there, leveraging technology to customize content to a student outside the classroom allows me to free up that classroom to really work on other things, such as assessment. You know, you have your traditional assessment of assignments, quizzes, exams, but I also, by using technology, I'm able to create discussions and get formative feedback from my students. But more importantly, what it allows me to do is motivate my students. And that's, Top Hat does a really good job of making the content accessible to students, and allows me to have those very personal conversations with students that help them motivate, overcome some obstacles, whether they hate math or some certain subject they get caught on. But one of the biggest things I try to fight and teach my students is emphasizing the learning over just checking the box and say that I've met that requirement, on to the next. Really focus on that learning is part of a large part of what I try to do on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why I try and motivate students to learn outside the classroom. One of the biggest things is student readiness, especially at the higher ed. We have a very diverse set of students coming from a very diverse set of educational backgrounds, let alone cultural. And so knowing that a student, when you start using words that they might not be accustomed to, their teacher called, some people might know of FOIL or the distributive property of algebra, and some students might not know that. So trying to get everybody in the same vocabulary. Student engagement, too often students come in and they just want to be talked at as to be talked with. And so trying to get students to engage in the classroom in informative conversations is something I try to do. Battling the misconceptions of learning, the fact that we are not just shoving information down their throat, it's an active participation on both ends. And then as I think it was Tanisha was talking about getting the time. Another thing about keeping content outside the classroom is you have certain material you have to cover. And by having that content outside the classroom, you are able to keep your schedule pretty close to as much as you can, but ultimately student success. Next slide. So how do I try to achieve this? Utilizing Top Hat, you can see the first thing I try to do is my syllabus. My syllabus, I changed from a piece of paper to a Pages document within Top Hat, where I've embedded questions, embedded videos about my family. That's my mom and my dad there talking about my family. And then you have embedded figures and stuff like that that catch students' eyes, hyperlinks to university policies, a live document that students can interact with, where I'm able to get, even before the class starts, students are engaged, know what the expectation I have for them, but they also can have for me. And so that's one of the things I try to do, is really from day one, make sure that that starts the page off right. Next slide. I do readiness assignments. So I've authored a textbook, but I've also made hundreds and thousands of hours of lecture notes or lecture videos, and I embed those in the same page. So those students that prefer to watch somebody teaching, they can watch the lecture videos. They prefer to read, they can read the content. They prefer to watch examples, and that's it. Each video comes with, or each example comes with a video of them me just working through the content. And so students can kind of pick and choose what they want to do. And at the end, they simply answer a question saying they've done what I've asked them to do and they're ready for the day, and that they get their selected points. Might sound a little gimmicky, but it's you'll see I have results coming later. But then I took my traditional assignments where I would hand them out and I made them pages. This allowed me to embed and customize the material so that the figures fit exactly how I want. They can answer their questions right next to each other. But one of the big things for the science people out there is the symbolic language has always been a barrier for many, many different softwares that I've tried to use, especially Blackboard doesn't work very well. So the nice thing is you're able to use symbolic language within the page itself. It's phenomenal. And then students can jump between question and question. It's very nice with the indexing. I also have students do interactive tasks at home. So this is something I would build and send it home for them to do before the next day, where it kind of walks them through something. And I have built in, if you don't, Desmos is an online software. It's like a graphing calculator where students can manipulate right within Top Hat's pages different activities I've set up for them. And then I ask them to complete a series of activities at the end and then submit a PDF of what they worked on. And so it kind of walks them through an exploration themselves. Next slide. And then one of the things I also do besides the syllabus is I start with some questions, try and get students on the same philosophical page of why I do what I do. And so I ask them for questions, answer a couple of questions. I have click on targets and then give me one word that answer what a student that's good at math or bad at math, what would you give? And I use that as a discussion my first day, as opposed to having to go over the syllabus because that's already been taken care of. Next slide, so you can see some of so this was last semester's results. And so what I tend to do is try and let the students realize that, like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, my way of trying to find a way to visualize getting into the learning objectives. If the entire white square was your learning objectives, everybody comes in with a little piece. And then as you do a little bit, get introduced to the content, you get more of the pieces. As you start really interacting with it, you get more of the piece. And then you can really start looking at filling in and learning, going through the content for yourself. And so that it allows me to dive into those ideas with students. And yeah, so that's some of the ideas that I try to go after with the students, and the results I think have spoken for themselves. So for the student side, students, the pass rate has gone up to 74%. I've had some classes that are higher than that, but roughly about a 74% pass rate, a 78% on the common final throughout all of Ohio University. They all take the same final exam. So 67% for all sections. My sections had about 78%. But most importantly, the one that I love is subsequent class, the next engineering class that students take, they're retaining the information. Because from a 60% success rate for students outside my sections, 92% pass rate for mine. And that is what we're here for, is them. And so some of the things that on my end, I've only had 2 syllabus questions since doing all this, which is awesome, especially with the weird stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. I have a 42% increase in videos being watched, even though I've embedded it in the video or in the text, and they just have to hit, I've read it. I have 13 students have taken the textbook that I wrote back to their high schools to try and show it to their teachers and say this is what they really enjoyed and caught on to. And then we talked about improving teacher ratings. I went from a 4.3 to a 4.7 out of a 5 rating. And so I've really enjoyed messing with these things, and I keep learning. And one of the things that I really love is the customization. A lot of what I do is actually adapted from the students. Students make a complaint to me, and right then and there we adapt it together. So it's really a collective mesh of all different mindsets is what ends up being delivered semester after semester.
Thank you, Blake. I love seeing all the data, and based on the questions and some of the comments coming through, the audience does as well. And with that, it is time for our Q&A. So I'd like to go ahead and invite all of our presenters to come back on camera, and give me just a moment. I'm going to pull up our Q&A and let's get to answering some questions. All right, everyone's on screen. So Blake, I'm just going to throw one at you because those came in most recently. You had quite a few questions just wanting to understand how they're impressed with all you've done, but it sounds like so much work. How do you scaffold for yourself? Any advice that you may have for someone who wants to do this in their own course?
The biggest thing is it's built over semester over semester over semester. That And it truly is like, I'm not kidding you. I'll be presenting something and a student goes, that reads weird. And right that I said, how do you want it to read? And I'll open it up, edit it right then and there and change it. So it is a lot of work to set up all these things, but when I had made videos, I started before it was called the flipped classroom, it was called reverse classroom back in 2007, whenever I started doing this. I'm waiting for it to be started being called the forward classroom because it's making its men, but it really isn't that much work after you've got your scaffold down. So you take your class and you adjust little by little with the input that you receive. I always laugh at my students that take me from course 1 to course 2 to course 3. They're like, nothing ever stays the same with me. They're like, yeah, you guys always got complaints.
I love that. Very adaptive. Thanks, Blake. Keith and Annetta, this is for you. How do you handle, so everything sounds really great, but how do you grade in large writing courses? Sounds like you need some AI or teaching assistance, they said, but have you found the secret formula there?
Oh, I'll take this. Yeah, so first of all, I teach lab courses. So they're, they enroll all of the students in our developmental writing program. So they do have traditional lecture courses. And that's where the writing, the normal essays and so forth, that's where that material is being assigned. However, it was deemed necessary by the powers that be that the students really needed a lot more practice in terms of reading, in terms of, some grammar materials and so forth, in order for them to do better and do well in these other courses. So interesting statistics, and this has held true, even during the pandemic. The statistics were even higher then, but 91 point something percent said that they got something really valuable out of this course. Between 88.8 and 92.7%, depending on the year, have said that their reading has improved, their critical reading skills and whatnot. Awesome outcome for that. And somewhere around 85%, and that's held true for the last 5-6 years, said that their writing improved as well, even though I didn't assign writing in this particular course. It was just a supplemental set of courses. So I mean, just really amazing. And
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead. And Annetta has some experience in the classroom too.
Just to add to what Keith was saying. So basically the assigned work in a lab course would be through assigned readings, and then a variety of assessments for reading comprehension, as well as rhetorical and writing strategies. And these assessments are then automatically graded, and feedback is automatically provided that has been written already, but it's provided both for correct and incorrect answers. And we find that feature to be incredibly important for student learning and for the student experience.
And since I have a lab course too, Top Hat allows you to adjust the point spread. So for the review questions, for instance, I give half credit for the student just participating and doing the question. And then for the quizzes themselves, we have lots of quizzes. Then they just have to get those questions correct, just the standard way.
Great, thank you. Tanisha, this one is for you. What are your thoughts on getting the balance right between content and learning assignments? Do you have a rule of thumb in terms of how you approach this?
Wow, that's a great question. What I'll say is, because I teach in a very hands-on, practice-based curriculum, I actually try to swing my students back the other way. So we don't usually have a lot of quizzes. We have projects they have to do. And so a lot of my classes have them, and I have these questions embedded right here in Top Hat. It has comprehension questions, but reflection questions, because my students aren't usually, they don't usually encounter those kinds of assignments and those kinds of questions, and especially for our lecture-based classes. So I guess to say our studio classes are more like labs, they do hands-on, and that's most of their curriculum. So I think, and I'm hoping I'm answering the question, I'm probably, I think it has to be based on your student population. And I think what Top Hat has allowed me to do is introduce for our students that traditional answer the question and then think deeper, a long answer format writing questions, introduce that more to them, which they're not used to. So my student population is a little unique. But I will say Top Hat has helped them to improve their writing as well, just like Keith, because they don't think a lab-based, studio-based curriculum has a lot of writing, which their profession does. So we also have seen improvement in writing through using Top Hat.
That's great. And I mean, that's our goal, that you can customize for that unique population. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. All right, I know we are coming up at time. So first, just want to again thank our speakers for sharing with us today. So many great ideas. Hopefully you're taking something valuable away from this conversation. I'd also encourage you to learn more about how you can drive student engagement using Top Hat, whether in the class or outside of the class. We are now going to launch a poll, so you should be seeing this on your screen. I'm here just asking a couple questions. It'll also give you an opportunity to follow a link for a free trial if you're interested in learning more about Top Hat. Any member of our team would be more than happy to discuss ways that you could use Top Hat in your own course. Now, before we go, I just want to highlight what is next for summer camp. We are in the home stretch, but you're not going to want to leave just yet. Up next, we're going to take a look at how we're helping instructors and close that achievement gap in STEM. You're going to hear from Justin Weinberg, the founder of Active, and he's going to share Active's pioneer learning solutions and how this is really changing the game to help students visualize, interact with, and master those challenging math and chemistry concepts. So go ahead, grab a snack, use the restroom, but just make sure you get back here. We're going to start back in about 13 minutes, 2 p.m. Eastern. Again, thank you so much for spending your time with us, for all of your participation, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.